sun rose over the small village, illuminating the thatched roofs and dusty paths where Adanne had spent her entire life. Her family's hut stood at the edge of the settlement, its walls cracked from years of neglect they couldn't afford to fix. "Adanne, fetch water before it gets too hot," her mother called, already tying a colorful wrapper around her waist, preparing to leave for another day of cooking in other people's homes. "Yes, Mama," Adanne replied, watching her father gather his tools for palm wine tapping. Every day followed the same pattern. Her father would return with barely enough palm wine to sell in the market, while her mother cooked meals in wealthy homes, occasionally bringing back leftovers wrapped in banana leaves, their most reliable source of good food. "We wish things were different," her father told her one evening as they ate by lamplight, her mother absent as usual. "School costs money we don't have." Adanne nodded, swallowing disappointment with her food. By 16, she accepted the reality that education wasn't her path. Instead, she began apprenticing at Mama Nkechi's hair salon in the village center. "Watch carefully," Mama Nkechi instructed on Adanne's first day, her experienced fingers weaving intricate braids. "This is your future now." The salon became Adanne's sanctuary, a place where women laughed and shared stories, where she could momentarily forget her family's struggles. After 3 months, she could create simple styles herself, earning small tips that she carefully saved in a wooden box under her sleeping mat. It was during the busy market day season when Uchenna first appeared. The salon door creaked open and he stood there, tall and slightly out of breath, his bicycle leaning against the outer wall. "Excuse me," he said, voice carrying over the chatter of women getting their hair done. "Could someone provide change for this money? The market vendors have none." While Mama Nkechi continued working, Adanne stepped forward. "I can help," she offered, counting coins from the day's earnings. Their fingers brushed as she handed him the change, and something changed in Uchenna's expression. "Thank you," he said, lingering longer than necessary. "I'm Uchenna. I sell yams at the Thursday market." "I'm Adanne," she replied, suddenly conscious of her worn dress. The following Thursday he appeared again. "My bicycle chain broke," he explained with a smile that suggested it might not be entirely true. Soon his visits became predictable. He would bring small gifts, a sweet orange, a handful of ground nuts, and wait for Adanne to finish work. "Walk with me," he would ask, and they would stroll through the village as sunset painted everything gold. "One day I'll have my own farm," he shared as they sat beneath a mango tree 3 months later. "No more selling other people's yams." Adanne believed him, despite knowing Uchenna struggled to eat regularly. Love made his dreams seem possible, and when he first kissed her beneath that same mango tree, she felt her heart soar with possibilities. Their courtship progressed through seasons, the rainy months when they huddled under market awnings, the dry period when they walked longer distances in the cool evenings. Neither had much, but they shared what little they possessed. When Adanne's monthly bleeding didn't come, panic gripped her. She counted days, waited another week, then finally faced the truth. "Uchenna," she whispered one evening as they sat by the village stream, "I'm carrying your child." His face transformed from confusion to shock to fear in moments. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice strained. When she nodded, he took her hands in his, but his touch felt different. Hesitant, frightened. "Adanne, my love," he said, eyes not meeting hers. "You know my situation. I sell yams that aren't even mine. My hut leaks when it rains. How can I care for a child?" His voice broke. "Please, if you can find a way to remove this baby, I would be grateful." "But it's our child," Adanne protested, tears welling in her eyes. Days passed with growing tension. Uchenna's visits became less frequent, his excuses more transparent. When she finally confronted him at the market, his response cut deeper than any knife. "If you keep that baby, I won't be there," he said coldly. I won't even look your way." At night, Adanne cried silently into her thin pillow. What would Mama do? She wondered aloud. The answer terrified her. Her mother would beat her. Her father would disown her. An unmarried pregnant daughter would bring unbearable shame. With a heavy heart, Adanne visited the old woman at the edge of the village, the one other girls whispered about. 3 days later, she bled away what might have been her first child. "It's done," she told Uchenna, her voice hollow. His relief was immediate and obvious. He embraced her, promises flowing once more. Now we can continue our lives properly. Life resumed its rhythm, but something had changed inside Adanne. 6 months later, when she missed her bleeding again, she didn't wait for Uchenna's reaction. "I'll take care of it," she told him flatly when she shared the news. This pattern repeated until the third time, when Adanne lay on the old woman's floor, bleeding far more heavily than before, pain tearing through her body like nothing she'd experienced. "Something's wrong," the old woman muttered, fear in her rheumy eyes. When Uchenna carried Adanne's limp body to the health center, her skin was cold and clammy, her pulse weak. "She's losing too much blood," the doctor said urgently. What happened? As Adanne drifted in and out of consciousness, she wondered if this was her punishment. For choices made from fear rather than courage, for a life that had barely begun. "Please," she heard Uchenna sob from somewhere far away. "Please don't let her die." It was the first time she'd heard true fear in his voice, the first glimpse that perhaps he did care after all, a realization that came nearly at the cost of her life. After Adanne's recovery from the botched abortion, their lives slowly returned to normal. Then one day, Uchenna received an unexpected phone call that would change everything. "Hello, Uchenna speaking," he answered. "Nephew, this is your uncle from Lagos," came the enthusiastic voice. "I have something good for you. Come to Lagos immediately." Uchenna's face lit up with excitement. His uncle was a successful businessman in the big city. This could be the opportunity he had been waiting for. "Adanne, my uncle wants me to come to Lagos," he told her that evening, his eyes shining with hope. "He says he has something for me." Adanne's heart sank. Lagos was far away, and many who left the village never returned. "What about us?" she asked quietly. Uchenna took her hands in his. "I promise I will come back for you. Give me some time to set up, then I will return and make you my wife." Though doubtful, Adanne nodded. She loved him too much to stand in his way. "I will wait for you," she said. For 2 long years, Adanne waited. She continued working at the salon, saving money and holding on to Uchenna's promise. Some days were harder than others, especially when people whispered that he had forgotten her. "He's probably found a city girl," one customer remarked loudly enough for Adanne to hear. But Adanne's patience was rewarded. One sunny morning, the sound of a car engine turned heads in the village. A shiny Honda pulled up to the salon, and out stepped Uchenna, dressed in fine clothes. "Adanne, I've come back for you," he announced proudly. "My uncle set me up with a business in Lagos. I've come to make you my wife." Their wedding was simple but joyful. Uchenna paid her bride price, making her parents proud at last. Soon after, they moved to Lagos, where Uchenna had a small but growing transport business. Their new life seemed perfect. Adanne opened her own hair salon while Uchenna's business expanded. They had a nice apartment, good food, and new clothes. But as 3 years passed, one thing was missing. A child. "Maybe we should see a doctor," Uchenna suggested one night. The doctor's news shattered their happiness. "Mrs. Adanne, I'm sorry, but your womb was severely damaged. It cannot carry a baby," he explained gently. Silence hung over them on the drive home. Finally, Adanne spoke. "The abortions, they ruined my womb." Uchenna couldn't look at her. He knew his part in this tragedy. "What do we do now?" he asked quietly. We could adopt, Adanne suggested after some time. 6 months later, they welcomed baby Dimma into their home. She was a beautiful baby girl with bright eyes and a sweet smile. For a while, everything seemed perfect again. But as Dimma grew, Adanne noticed problems. At 1 year old, Dimma wasn't trying to stand or say simple words like other babies her age. Maybe she's just slow, Uchenna reassured, but worry lines creased his forehead. As months passed, their concern grew. Dimma's face had unusual features. Her eyes were wide set, and she didn't respond to sounds normally. "God, what kind of child have we adopted?" Adanne cried one night after trying for hours to feed Dimma, who kept turning away. They took Dimma to a specialist who examined her carefully. "Your daughter has special needs," the doctor explained. "She will need extra care and therapy to help her develop." Adanne's face fell. This was not the motherhood she had imagined. The responsibility grew heavier with each passing day. Dimma needed constant attention, and Adanne's salon business began to suffer. "I can't go to work because she needs me here," Adanne complained to Uchenna. "Our money is going to doctors and therapies, and she's not getting better." After 2 years, Dimma still couldn't walk or talk. Adanne's patience was running thin. "Uchenna, I'm tired," she said one evening, her voice breaking. "I can't continue like this. We need to find another solution for this child, or I can't take care of her anymore." Uchenna looked shocked. "What are you saying? She's our daughter now." "If we give her up, we'll be childless again," he reasoned. Adanne's eyes hardened. "It's better to be childless than to suffer this stress every day." The argument continued for days, but Adanne had made up her mind. One early morning, while Uchenna was still sleeping, she wrapped Dimma in a blanket and carried her to the river that ran through the city. Looking around to make sure no one was watching, Adanne whispered, "I'm sorry," and threw Dimma into the deep water. Then she ran home as fast as her legs could carry her. People who saw her running thought someone was chasing her, but she was running from what she had done. When she burst through the door, Uchenna was awake and looking confused. "Adanne, where is Dimma?" I, she stammered, unable to speak the terrible truth. Uchenna's face darkened. "Where is our daughter?" he demanded, his voice rising. "In the river," Adanne finally whispered, tears streaming down her face. Uchenna stared at her in horror. "Oh my God, you killed her. You actually threw our baby in the river?" "I thought we discussed it," Adanne said weakly. "Discussed what?" Uchenna shouted. "That you would murder our child. Do you know how much we spent for the adoption? Almost 5 million naira, and you just threw her away like trash." He grabbed Adanne's shoulders, his eyes wild with anger and grief. "Before daybreak, I need to see that child back home. Go find her. Now!" Adanne sat on the steps outside their home, her mind racing with the horror of what she had done. The river was deep and fast-moving. Even if she went back now, Dimma would surely have drowned. What could she possibly tell Uchenna? "I've killed our daughter," she whispered to herself, the reality of her actions sinking in. Her hands trembled as she covered her face, hot tears streaming between her fingers. When Uchenna finally came outside, he walked past her without a word, his face stone-cold with anger and grief. For 7 long days, silence filled their home. Uchenna slept on the couch, ate separately, and left for work before she woke up. The weight of what she had done hung over their house like a dark cloud. On the 7th day, Uchenna finally spoke to her. "We need to find another solution," he said, his voice hollow. "I can't bring Dimma back, but I can't live like this either." They began visiting fertility clinics again, hoping for a miracle. Doctors examined Adanne repeatedly, but the verdict remained the same. Her womb was too damaged to carry a child. Maybe we should try another adoption agency, Uchenna suggested one evening. They'll ask questions about our first child, Adanne replied quietly. What will we tell them? Their marriage grew colder as months passed. The nice house and fine clothes meant nothing now. The emptiness of their home echoed with what might have been. In all their years together, through struggles and success, neither Adanne nor Uchenna had ever thought much about God or church. Money, business, and material things had consumed them completely. One Saturday evening, they attended a birthday party for one of Uchenna's business associates. The celebration did little to lift their spirits. As they drove home in silence, a man stepped in front of their car at a traffic light. "Careful!" Adanne shouted as Uchenna slammed on the brakes. Instead of walking away, the man came to Uchenna's window. "Good evening, brother and sister," he said with a warm smile. "I am Pastor God's Power. Our church is having a revival service next week. Please take this flyer and join us." Uchenna accepted the flyer politely, but Adanne rolled her eyes. As soon as they drove away, she took the paper, folded it, and tossed it out the window. "All these fake pastors," she muttered. "What can they do for us?" Uchenna sighed but said nothing, placing his own flyer in the car's storage compartment. 3 more months passed. They continued visiting hospitals and specialists, hoping for some medical breakthrough that would allow Adanne to conceive. But nothing changed. One particularly difficult morning, Adanne found herself alone in the house. Uchenna had left early for a business meeting, and the silence was overwhelming. She fell to her knees in the middle of their living room. "I'm so tired of this life," she sobbed openly. "What do I do? My home is so empty, no cry of a baby, no laughter, nothing." As she cried, something stirred in her memory, the pastor they had met months ago, the way he had smiled at them with such genuine warmth. "The flyer," she whispered, suddenly sitting up. "I threw mine away, but Uchenna might still have his." She jumped to her feet and rushed to the sitting room where Uchenna was usually found reading the newspaper. "Honey," she called out, forgetting he wasn't home. Then she remembered and grabbed her phone instead, calling him urgently. "What is it?" Uchenna asked, his voice concerned. "That flyer the man of God gave us the day we were returning from your friend's party." "Where did you keep yours?" she asked, her words tumbling out quickly. "I think I left it in the car," he replied, puzzled by her sudden interest. "Check the storage compartment or under the seat." Adanne rushed outside to their Honda, her heart pounding. She yanked open the door and frantically searched the compartments. Finally, she spotted it, slightly crushed but still readable, right under the front seat. "Thank God," she breathed, carefully unfolding the paper. She examined the flyer thoroughly, taking in the church name, address, and service times. At the bottom, she noticed a phone number printed in small text, "For prayer and counseling." "Let me call first," she decided, rushing back inside to get her phone. With shaking fingers, she dialed the number. After 3 rings, a deep, kind voice answered. "Hello, God's Restoration Ministry. How may I help you?" "Please, am I speaking with Pastor God's Power?" Adanne asked nervously. "Yes, this is Pastor God's Power. Is there a problem, my daughter?" Something about being called daughter broke something inside Adanne. Her voice cracked. "Yes, Pastor. I need help. My husband and I. We have problems." "I understand," the pastor replied gently. "Would you like to come to the church for counseling?" "Yes, Pastor, please," Adanne replied eagerly. "How can I locate your ministry?" "Check the flyer. The location is well stated there," he explained patiently. "Once you get to Abakpa, Lagos, near Eco Hotel, the church is adjacent to the connecting junction. You can't miss it." "Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir," Adanne repeated, feeling a strange hope rising within her for the first time in months. As she hung up the phone, Adanne stood still for a moment, clutching the flyer to her chest. Whatever it took, she would go to this church. She had tried everything else: doctors, specialists, adoption. Maybe what they needed wasn't just a solution to their childlessness, but something deeper, something to heal the emptiness and guilt that had plagued their lives. Without wasting another minute, Adanne began preparing to visit the church. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew she couldn't continue living with the weight of what she had done. Perhaps it was time to seek forgiveness, not just from Uchenna, but from something greater than both of them. Adanne quickly changed into her best dress and grabbed her handbag. She had to get to this church immediately. As she rushed toward the door, Uchenna was just coming in from work. "Honey, where are you heading to in this haste?" Uchenna asked, surprised by her urgency. Adanne barely slowed down as she passed him. "I'm coming, honey," was all he could hear as she hurried out the door and flagged down a taxi. The taxi driver knew Abakpa, Lagos well. "Near Eco Hotel, madam," he confirmed after she showed him the flyer. "Yes, please hurry," Adanne urged, her fingers nervously tapping against her purse. The church wasn't large or fancy like Samo in Lagos, but it had a certain welcoming feel. A simple sign read, "God's Restoration Ministry," above the entrance. Adanne paid the driver and stepped out, taking a deep breath before walking in. Inside, several people sat on plastic chairs in the waiting area. A young woman at a small desk looked up as Adanne entered. "Good afternoon, sister. How may we help you?" the woman asked. I need to see Pastor Godspower," Adanne replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Do you have an appointment?" the woman asked kindly. "No, but we spoke on the phone just now," Adanne explained. The woman nodded. "Please have a seat. The pastor is seeing people in order of arrival today. It's our counseling day." Adanne sat down, her heart racing. She watched as one by one people went in to see the pastor and came out looking either relieved or deep in thought. Would he really have answers for her? After nearly 2 hours of waiting, it was finally Adanne's turn. The young woman led her to a simple office where Pastor Godspower sat behind a desk with an open Bible. "Welcome, my daughter," he said warmly, gesturing to the chair across from him. "What troubles your heart today?" Adanne sat down, suddenly feeling all her carefully prepared words vanish. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Pastor, please," she began, her voice breaking. "I've been childless for 7 good years now after my marriage. Help me, I've been so frustrated all these years." Pastor Godspower nodded sympathetically. "I understand your pain, but first, let us seek God's wisdom." He closed his eyes and bowed his head. "Madam," he said after a moment, his voice gentle but firm, "be calm, let me hear from God." The room fell silent. Adanne could hear the ceiling fan whirring above them and distant traffic outside, but most of all she could hear her own heart pounding in her chest. What would he say? After what seemed like an eternity, the pastor opened his eyes, looking directly at her with unexpected intensity. "You have made a terrible mistake in the past," he said, his voice echoing in the small office. Adanne's mind immediately flashed back to the abortions, the pain, the blood, the shame. Tears began streaming down her face. He knew. How could he know? "I'm sorry," she sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "But madam," Pastor Godspower continued, leaning forward, "there is only one way out of this situation. According to what the Lord has shown me, a child somewhere is hindering you from conceiving." He paused, watching her carefully. "Have you by chance been cruel to any child in the past?" Adanne froze, her tears suddenly stopping. "Child?" she echoed, confused. This wasn't about the abortions. "Yes," the pastor pressed gently. "Have you ever maltreated any child before?" Then it hit her like a thunderbolt. Dimma. Her mind raced back to that terrible morning at the river, the small bundle she had thrown into the dark waters, the way she had run away without looking back. "Pastor," she began, her voice barely audible. I and my husband once adopted a baby, but she was a special needs child. For 2 years, she couldn't talk or walk. Adanne's voice broke. I was frustrated. I threw her into the river. Pastor God's Power's expression remained calm, but he nodded slowly. The spirit is not lying, he confirmed. That baby you threw away is alive. She is the answer to your prayers. His voice grew more serious. You need to find her and ask for forgiveness. Otherwise, you will remain barren forever. The weight of his words crashed down on Adanne with such force that the room began to spin around her. Her husband had warned her. He had begged her not to harm their child, and now her cruel act was standing between her and the biological child she desperately wanted. Alive? She whispered, before everything went black. Adanne collapsed onto the floor. Church workers rushed in at the sound, helping the pastor lift her onto a small couch in the corner of the office. One pressed a damp cloth to her forehead, while another fanned her vigorously. Give her some space, Pastor God's Power instructed, as Adanne's eyes finally fluttered open. The truth can be overwhelming when it confronts us. With trembling hands, Adanne picked up her bag and phone from the floor where they had fallen. The church workers helped her to steady herself as she stood. Thank you, Pastor, she mumbled, her mind spinning with what she had just learned. I need to go home now. Pastor God's Power nodded. Go with faith, my daughter. Find the child and make things right. The taxi ride home felt endless. Adanne stared out the window, barely seeing the busy Lagos streets passing by. Her thoughts were a jumbled mess of guilt, hope, and disbelief. Where will I start from? She whispered to herself. It's been 3 years since I threw baby Dimma into the river. Who do I tell? What if my husband hears this? Will he believe me? These questions tormented her all the way home. By the time she paid the taxi driver and walked into their apartment, she had made up her mind to tell Uchenna everything. He was waiting in the living room, worry etched on his face. Where have you been? I tried calling you. Adanne sat beside him on the couch, her hands clasped tightly together to stop them from shaking. Uchenna, I went to see Pastor God's Power. The one who gave us the flyer? He asked, surprised. Yes, she nodded, and he told me something. She took a deep breath. He said Dimma is still alive, honey. Uchenna stared at her in disbelief. Alive? After 3 years? That's impossible, Adanne continued. The pastor said she is the answer to our prayers. We need to find her and ask for forgiveness if we ever want to have children of our own. After a long silence, Uchenna spoke. Let's go to the river first. The next morning, they drove to the river where Adanne had committed her terrible act. The water flowed calmly, giving no hint of the tragedy that had occurred there years before. They walked along the banks, asking everyone they met if they had seen or heard of a child being rescued from the river 3 years ago. No, nothing like that happened here, an old woman selling roasted corn by the riverside told them. They returned day after day, expanding their search area, showing people a photo of Dimma they had kept. But no one recognized the child or remembered any baby being rescued from the water. Do any fishermen work on this river? Uchenna asked a young boy playing nearby on their 4th visit. Yes, the boy replied. They come early in the morning to catch fish. This gave them new hope. They started coming to the river at dawn, approaching the fishermen as they prepared their boats and nets. We haven't seen any trace of a child, one fisherman after another told them. Weeks passed with no success. Their hope began to fade. One morning, after nearly a month of searching, Uchenna woke up early and called to Adanne. Honey, let's go back to the river and check once again. Adanne was still in bed, exhausted from their fruitless search. Honey, we've been going there for the past 4 weeks with nothing to show for it. Let's rest today and maybe try again next week." Uchenna's face hardened. "Remember, you were the cause of this. Had you listened to me then, none of this would have happened." Adanne hated being blamed. It's okay, she snapped back. "Now you're blaming me. Didn't you see the stress and frustration I went through back then? I'm coming, let me prepare, please, before you use talk and finish me this morning." She got out of bed reluctantly, muttering under her breath. Had Adanne refused to go that morning, she would have missed the miracle God had prepared for them. But something pushed her to go, perhaps guilt, perhaps hope, perhaps divine intervention. That morning, Adanne and Uchenna drove to the river with heavy hearts. After weeks of searching, their hope was running thin. The sun was just rising as they parked near the riverbank, the water shimmering in the early light. "Let's try again," Uchenna said quietly, stepping out of the car. They approached the first group of fishermen they saw, men who were already sorting through their early morning catch. "Excuse me," Uchenna called out. "Have you seen a little girl around here? She would have special needs." The fishermen shook their heads. "No, we haven't," they replied, barely looking up from their work. Adanne sighed loudly and turned to Uchenna. "See? I told you we should have stayed home. It's been 4 weeks of the same answer. By now I could be resting in bed instead of standing here getting nothing but disappointment." Uchenna's face tightened, but he said nothing. He understood her frustration, even though her words stung. As Adanne continued complaining, Uchenna's attention shifted to something in the distance. A small boat was approaching the shore. There were 2 men aboard, and between them sat a small child, a little girl. "Adanne, look," Uchenna said suddenly, grabbing her arm and pointing. "Some fishermen are coming. And there's a child with them." Adanne stopped mid-sentence and turned to look where Uchenna was pointing. Both of them stared as the boat drew closer to shore. Adanne's mind raced. Wait, baby Dimma was 2 years old when I did that terrible thing. It's been 3 years since then, so she would be 5 now. Her heart began to pound as she looked at the approaching child, trying to make out her features. The boat reached the shore, and the fishermen began unloading their catch. The little girl sat quietly, watching them work. Uchenna approached them cautiously. "Hello, sir. Please, can we ask you some questions?" One of the fishermen looked up with suspicious eyes. "What is it?" he replied, his voice harsh and defensive. Adanne stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. "Sir, please, we're looking for a child with special needs, about 5 years old." The fisherman narrowed his eyes. "A child?" he asked slowly. "Girl or boy?" "Girl, sir," Adanne answered quickly, her eyes never leaving the quiet child in the boat. The little girl had the same round face Adanne remembered, the same gentle eyes. Though she was bigger now, something about her seemed familiar. Could this be Dimma? She whispered to herself, her hand unconsciously reaching for Uchenna's. The fisherman glanced around at the growing crowd of onlookers and motioned toward a quieter spot. "Let's speak at that corner," he said, his voice softening slightly. Adanne's heart raced as they followed him. She squeezed Uchenna's hand tightly, hardly daring to breathe. Just that morning she had tried to convince her husband to skip their search for the day. If he had listened to her complaints, they would have missed this moment, possibly their only chance to find Dimma. They walked to a secluded area under a large tree at the edge of the riverbank. Other fishermen had noticed the unusual interaction and were watching from a distance, their curious eyes following the group. The older fisherman set down his nets and looked directly at them. "My daughter, my son," he said gently. "Who are you and what happened to your child?" Adanne took a deep breath. It was time to face what she had done. With trembling hands, she began to tell their story, how they had adopted Dimma, discovered she had special needs, and how the stress had overwhelmed her. Her voice cracked as she admitted to the terrible thing she had done 3 years ago. I was so frustrated, she said, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. I didn't know what to do. I brought her to this river and... She couldn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. Uchenna put his arm around her shoulders as she cried. After a moment of heavy silence, one of the fishermen spoke up. It was on a Friday morning, he began, his weathered face serious but kind. We rarely come fishing on Fridays, but that day we decided to try our luck. He pointed to the quiet little girl who was now sitting on the boat's edge, watching a butterfly. Suddenly, we saw something in the water, struggling. At first, we thought it was a big crocodile or some other water animal. But when we got closer, we saw it was a child. The fisherman's voice grew softer. We rescued her and brought her to shore. She was barely breathing. We took her home and realized she couldn't walk or talk, though a child her age should have been doing both. He smiled slightly. But we took things easy. We nurtured her. Thank God for my wife, she's an angel. She took on the whole responsibility. The child started walking just last year at age 4, but she still can't talk. We believe she will someday, though. Adanne looked at the little girl, her daughter, with new eyes. Dimma was alive. After all this time, after what Adanne had done, her child had survived. Waves of guilt, shame, and relief washed over her. She had wronged this innocent child so deeply, despised her, neglected her, and ultimately tried to end her life. Yet here Dimma sat, saved by the kindness of strangers, when her own mother had failed her. "May I?" Adanne whispered through her tears. "May I go to her?" The fisherman nodded, and Adanne slowly approached the little girl. Dimma looked up with curious eyes but didn't flinch or show fear. Adanne knelt in front of her daughter, tears streaming down her face. "Dimma," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." The little girl tilted her head, studying Adanne's face. Then, to everyone's surprise, she reached out and touched Adanne's wet cheek. Adanne couldn't hold back anymore. She gently pulled Dimma into her arms, holding her close. "Please forgive me," she sobbed into the child's hair. "I was wrong, so terribly wrong." Uchenna joined them, kneeling beside his wife and the daughter they had almost lost. Neither could find words to express their feelings, gratitude, shame, and overwhelming relief all mixed together. After composing themselves, they turned to the fisherman. "We can never thank you enough," Uchenna said, his voice thick with emotion. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. "Please, take this. It's nothing compared to what you've done, but..." The older fisherman accepted the money with a humble nod. "There is one more thing," he said. "You need to come to our house and meet my wife. She is the real hero in all this. She was the masterpiece of everything. She nursed your daughter day and night when we first found her." Adanne and Uchenna exchanged looks of amazement. The way this old man spoke about his wife with such love and respect touched something deep within them. In that moment, their own bond seemed to strengthen, as they silently promised each other to rebuild their marriage with the same kind of devotion. "We would be honored to meet her," Adanne said. The fishermen finished their work for the day, and then the entire group traveled to the fisherman's modest home near the outskirts of town. It was a simple dwelling, but warmth radiated from every corner. A woman in her 60s greeted them at the door, her eyes widening when she saw Dimma with the strangers. The fisherman quickly explained the situation as they all settled in the small living room. Adanne and Uchenna properly introduced themselves and expressed their heartfelt gratitude, explaining their long search for their daughter. The woman listened with compassion in her eyes, never judging Adanne for what she had done. "Thank you," Adanne said, holding the woman's weathered hands in hers. "You saved my daughter when I failed her. You loved her when I couldn't. I don't know how to repay such kindness." The woman smiled gently. "Just love her now. That's all that matters." As they prepared to leave, the woman touched Adanne's arm. I want to be seeing my daughter during holidays, she said, her eyes misty. Bring her to visit me sometimes. Of course, Adanne promised. That's not a problem. We certainly will. The journey home was filled with quiet joy and disbelief at how their lives had changed in a single day. Dimma sat between them in the car, looking out the window with curious eyes at the world passing by. Over the next weeks, Adanne devoted herself to making Dimma feel loved and secure. She decorated a special room for her daughter, bought her toys and pretty clothes, and spent hours each day helping her learn and develop. The bond between mother and daughter grew stronger with each passing day. 4 months after finding Dimma, Adanne woke up feeling strange. After several days of the same symptoms, she decided to take a pregnancy test, not expecting much given what doctors had told her about her damaged womb. When the test showed positive, she couldn't believe her eyes. She took 3 more tests just to be sure. "Uchenna," she called out, running to find her husband. Look at this." She thrust the test results into his hands, her whole body trembling with excitement. Uchenna stared at the tests, his eyes widening in disbelief. Are you?" "Yes," Adanne cried. "I'm pregnant. The womb the doctors said was badly damaged is now carrying our baby." They fell into each other's arms, holding on tightly as years of pain and struggle melted away in the warmth of their embrace. They stood like that for what seemed like hours, remembering all they had been through to reach this moment. "We conquered it all, honey," Uchenna whispered against her hair. "Together, we conquered it all.